Welcome to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. Today, we've entitled this episode Midgets and Other Short Stories.
First of all, I'd just like to thank everybody who tuned in and listened to Witches and Gingers. We had a lot of positive feedback for that podcast. I had specifically one very helpful piece of advice from a friend who texted me within about 30 minutes of the release, and he said, "Good job on not being too mean about the witches, because you know they've sold their souls to the devil, unlike the Gingers, who have no souls."
True.
So, I'm looking forward to his feedback on this one, because it's
absolutely.
absolutely going to be dynamite.
I'm looking forward to that as well. I honestly
Yeah.
don't know how we made it through there without being too offensive, and I've got my fingers crossed that we're going to be able to get through this one without being too offensive.
Well, if we kind of shake off the hexes we got from the last episode, I do want to say that when we're using the word midget through this podcast, we are absolutely not trying to be offensive. There is very mixed opinions on the internet whether the word midget is offensive or not.
Well, and of course, we know everything on the internet is true.
Well,
so.
yeah, and that's why, like I said, when it's split 50-50, I just don't know what to believe. But the Little People of America, which was formed in 1957, amazingly, when I think midgets had their prime kind of movie appearances, you think around that type of era, they've kind of slunk off a little bit. There's not that many roles for midgets since.
That is true, because you've got The Wizard of Oz, of course, and that's a famous one. You've got Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah,
I always get confused which one's the book and which one's the movie.
Right.
And so you got them in there.
Fantasy Island, the midget there. The plane.
Oh yeah, but don't
he had
forget,
a good career.
Yeah, but don't forget, he was in James Bond
Yeah.
before that, and he basically played kind of that same character, which I didn't know as I've been going through the Bond films. Yeah, there he was. So yeah, you got that, and then you move on into the 80s, and you got some littler people in there. I don't know if you could necessarily consider them midgets or not. Not too big, and then you're right. It just kind of all died off. The only one that really comes to mind, actually there's two, is Peter Dinklage, of course. And so I'm sure there's lots of Games of Thrones fans out there. I'm not much of a Game of Thrones fan person, but you got him. I remember him more, honestly, from the movie Elf than I do Game of Thrones.
Oh, wow.
So you got him, and then you've got Wee Man from the Jackass series.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny how they called him Wee Man. And, he grabbed a hold of that name. So those are the only two, honestly, that just in modern day times, as we'll call them, come to mind.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about that when I was driving to the studio tonight, that I don't necessarily think being a person of small stature really kind of negates you from many jobs. I mean, point guard for the Dallas Mavericks, probably not getting the job.
Probably not.
All right, tight end, Cowboys, not getting the job.
Probably
not.
But,
I don't think there's as much discrimination as there are for, I guess, perhaps, physical disabilities, because really, if you're a person of short stature, you don't really have a disability. You just happen to be short.
Correct.
You still have, there's nothing cognitively, deficient. You just happen to be short. And most jobs, you don't have to have necessarily, unless there's shelf stacking at Walmart on the top shelf.
Right.
It's not really,
an issue. But see, let's take that into consideration, though. Let's say you're the hiring manager at Walmart and you got some shelf stockers out there that you got to hire. Wouldn't you want to hire the midget to be able to stock the bottom shelves?
Yeah,
so
he could do it so much quicker.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's not a disadvantage. If you look at it in a certain way, it could be actually an advantage.
But would it also not be so much funnier for the top shelf one if you had one midget pushing along a step ladder for the other midget to reach the top shelf?
Well, yeah. See, there you go. Forward thinking right there. Upward mobility. That's what it's all about.
Now, I know the topic of midgets is very close to your heart because you've always had a fascination with them.
I honestly can say I have.
You have, and I don't want to say it's an unnatural fascination, but it kind of somewhat is. I remember the first time I saw you actually see two midgets in the flesh, and you were just standing there drooling. It was at a friend's party, and we were playing, what is it, cornhole or whatever that game is. And I was playing with my beautiful, wonderful single friend, Kristen, who, if you're a single male in the DFW area, she is available, so just send me a message.
Oh, I had no idea we were going to do dating shout-outs.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, but anyway.
Nothing wrong with that?
No, we were playing cornhole, doing pretty good. Our friend Eric, to the left of me, had a lot to drink, and I think he threw a few of his things over the fence directly to the left of us and completely missed it. But then we saw the two midgets like about 3 rows down, and you weren't even playing the game. You were just standing there watching them. And I remember watching them and thinking, they suck at this game. You've got to give them half the distance because, I mean,
sure.
You know, I mean, just the whole thing of, look, I understand you're trying to compete, but look, you're not even reaching it. You've got to move down there, you know. So I think there does need to be certain allowances for short people. You know, but we don't have to treat them as less than just because they're small.
Sure. I guess it's the same reason why. Look at basketball, you know, to use something that's stereotypically for tall people. Even in college basketball, the three-point line is closer than it is in the pros. So, you know, they don't have necessarily that ability like the pros do to be able to sink the basket, so they put it a little bit closer.
Right.
So it's basically kind of the same thing. So in you looking into all of this stuff and doing a little bit of your fact checking, what exactly defines a midget?
Well, it's supposed to be somebody who is proportional in terms of their limbs to their body. So basically, if you took a regular sized human, maybe of average height for a woman or a male, but they stopped growing at around about 3 feet, 3.5 feet, but kept those same proportions, that is a midget. Whereas dwarves have disproportionate sized limbs.
So you're talking more about like when you get that picture of somebody with the kind of the big head.
We're going back to Peter Dinklage again.
Yeah. That kind of thing. So there is a difference between a midget and a dwarf. Dwarf.
Yeah, there is a difference. And
is dwarf actually that, you know, term that is used?
It is. It's called
in the little people world, I guess is what I should say.
Well, I think originally it's just called dwarfism.
Okay.
And that was the term applied to somebody who had growth impediments, I guess you want to say. But dwarves get very offended by the term midget.
Wow. Okay, so hang on. Let me get this straight now.
Yeah.
So dwarves get offended by the term midget.
Yes.
They don't consider themselves midgets.
Right.
But midgets do not get offended by the term midget.
No.
This is already getting very complex.
Well, this is going back to the Little People of America organization. They call the midget word the M word. They don't even want to mention it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the new slur, the M word, and it only seems to be dwarves who are offended by the use of the word midget. When you go on the internet and you look at stories about midgets and you know, people giving their testimonies, they don't care about the word midget. It only seems to be dwarves who dislike the word midget. And it's funny because, you know, they don't mind the word dwarf, even given its kind of like connotations with, you know, Lord of the Rings or whatever.
To be honest with you,
I hate the word midget.
I hear the term dwarf, and what I picture is something out of like Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I picture a short, like warrior type person. You know, big sword, kind of for some reason a big nose. Don't know why I picture that, but that's what comes to mind when I hear the word dwarf.
Because he has a disproportionately sized nose. That's why, yeah.
But I get that kind of, let's call it mythical picture in my head. I don't picture a real life thing. It's like a unicorn yeah, it looks like a horse and it's got a horn on its head. But if I heard unicorn, I picture, something mythical.
Yeah.
I don't picture that being something that's actually real, but dwarves are real.
Yeah. And dwarfism in terms of height is actually described as 4'10" or shorter. Which
4'10" or shorter.
Yeah. So
wow.
they are pissed off at Six Flags for one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not many rides they can ride.
So the typical heights for dwarves are between 2'8" and 4'8", which makes me wonder kind of like why they did that 4'10". I think they were just trying to push the envelope there, because I bet you at Six Flags it's like 4'8" or something, and they're like, let's sneak a few dwarves on the rides just to kind of even it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can't honestly picture Six Flags having like a little people day, because why even bother? You'd have to shut down 3/4 of the park.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that'd be a good idea. That'd be a good marketing thing.
Yeah. I guess.
It's because of the safety guards which come down. If you're shorter than a certain height, you can slip under those. And like the last thing you want to see on that roller coaster, when it does that loop thing, does that 360 is like 20 dwarves flying off in the air.
That wouldn't be a good thing.
Lawsuit waiting to happen.
Absolutely.
But also, I mean, on the internet, it's very difficult to find much factual information in terms of backgrounds of, I guess societies or social groupings of dwarves and midgets, because the whole attraction historically, when you had them in fairgrounds and carnivals and stuff, was unique.
Right, we're talking about like the P.T. Barnum days when he had his sideshow and he's got the bearded lady and he's got all this other stuff, right? And then what was the famous one? Is it Tiny Tim?
Tiny Tim.
Tim. It's kind of like that. It was like, here's something you don't see every day.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And let's be honest, you don't see a midget or a dwarf or a little person or whatever you want to call them. You don't see them necessarily every day if you're just...
Much to your dismay.
Yes, much to my dismay, absolutely. I mean, unless you're working with one, or maybe you've got... a neighbor that is one, you just don't see them that often, and I guess that's part of a little of my fascination. It's just I don't know why I'm so drawn to it, but I certainly am. It seems unicornish. It seems unreal to me.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I find it difficult to comprehend why the word midget is offensive, whereas dwarf is not. I mean, obviously, I'm neither.
I would think it would honestly be the other way around.
Right, I would honestly think that too, because one of the first definitions I found for a dwarf online, and I saw this on 3 different websites, and it came up on the first page of Google. So out of 10 search results, when I looked up what is a dwarf, this is the description which came up.
Okay.
A dwarf is considered a legendary creature resembling a tiny old man who lives in the depths of the earth and guards buried treasure.
So isn't that very similar to like a gnome? The ones with the little pointy hats and all of that?
Yeah.
Because that's what, when you read that, that's immediately what I picture in my head. And I'm not talking about that cartoon that David the Gnome where they were little bitty.
Right.
I'm talking about kind of the bigger gnomes, but... you've got all of these, once again, mythical creatures in there. So you got the gnomes, you got the leprechauns, this little person, right? I just still attribute that word dwarf more towards that mythical, pretend, whatever. So then you would think that would be the offensive term.
Right.
And not to just keep rehashing one, but let's think about that scene in the movie Elf, where he's in the boardroom and Buddy the Elf calls him an elf.
Right.
Kind of that same thing, in that movie, the elves, they're all short and all that good stuff. That's kind of part of the premise behind the movie. So he got real offended by Buddy calling him an elf. Now, obviously, elves, a little bit different, the pointy ears and all that, and there's no real elves, I guess, unless you're from Iceland and you kind of still believe in the elves, but do we want to go down that rabbit hole quite yet? I don't know.
Well, actually, I went to a website, and it's called differencebetween.net.
Okay.
Now, I can't really stand up and put my name behind the validity of a lot of the claims on the website.
Okay.
But I did actually look up the difference between gnomes and dwarves on this website. And again, as we don't really kind of barely tend to fact check anything, I'm just going to go with this as fact.
Oh, well, once again, it's on the internet, so it's got to be true.
So it says both gnomes and dwarves are small human-like creatures. The gnomes live underground, whereas dwarves live in forests and mountains. So...
But, see, once again, even with that definition, they're saying human-like. Wouldn't that, as a little person, wouldn't that be extremely offensive?
Right. You'd think
if you
so,
look
right?
something up
You would think so.
And there's literally a definition out there saying human-like rather than a human. Well, that just has this condition.
Well, this is the other thing. And I took pretty much the first results I got back on the first page of Google search.
Right.
So you have to figure these are the most commonly clicked on, links.
Right.
And one of the first ones on Google was, do dwarves and gnomes get along?
Do dwarves and gnomes get along?
Yeah, do they have any beef with each other? Is they fighting? Are they just angry? Are they allowed to intermarry?
Right. Are they enemies? Are they friends? Would they live in the same neighborhood together, or would they practice? But it was
posted as like a serious question. It's like, do gnomes and dwarves? I mean, they get on or not? But also, I want to know who's asking this question and who wants to know and for what reason.
Well, you know what? There's a lot of bored people out there.
Well, there are, but they're a similar one. Like, I think just about one link down was, are dwarves and gnomes the same? And the answer, and this was on, I think, ask.com, which is a very common website where people ask a lot of stuff, under the asking for a friend type thing. And the top response was, they're likely originally the same thing.
Ooh.
So dwarves and gnomes are likely the same thing.
So that could really be taken offensive for those that, maybe formed their own sect there and said, no, we've never been the same. I could see this movement behind some dwarves that would say, oh no, we had never been the same. Of course, gnomes aren't real. But, you're getting that look again, kind of like
that's not
elves.
true, because I had two in my garden in my last house, so that's true.
Well, that's a good point.
But even with Reddit, though, which is one of the top, obviously, social media platforms on the internet, when you type in dwarves, the top response for years and years of, through all that hundreds of thousands of forums was, is there any actual difference between dwarves and gnomes?
Yeah.
So you've got the great minds of Reddit there at work, and that's their top.
And so for those years, then they still haven't been able to solve the mystery.
Yeah, and I mean also on Google, on that very first page, and I had to stop and think about this question myself when I read it. I got quite existential for about 5 minutes, but it came up with, why do dwarves hate giants?
I didn't realize that they could, but you know what? I could honestly see that. I mean, there's always been, even among people that are what we'll call normal or average height, they always seem to be jealous of something they don't have. So they might be jealous of taller people.
Right.
Think about there's a deal that goes around the internet all the time about single women that are dating, and they always say, he's got to be 6 foot tall or taller. So if you say, I'm 5 foot, she already has turned off her interest on that. Even if you say I'm 5'11" 3/4, if you don't start the sentence out with my height is 6 foot something, they just immediately shut down.
3'10" is not going to cut it.
I don't think so.
I don't think it's going to cut it.
But
unless they're a millionaire.
Well, yeah,
because you can be 1'10" and be a millionaire, and
absolutely,
you're going to get a lot of hits on your Match.com profile. One thing I did find while I say doing research, I was just typing in words and following the first links I could find, is it's just amazing how many little people get led into life of crime. I literally found dozens upon dozens of stories of dwarves being led into lives of crime, and it was like, and a lot of the time they're being manipulated. It's not like a bunch of dwarves getting together and saying, "Hey, look, his TV gig's not working out since the little people of America ruined it for us.
Right.
So let's go into like robbing jewelry stores." How many of them were actually being manipulated by gangs, especially in South America, where they would get midgets or dwarves and actually get them to do the dirty work for them.
That's interesting, because when you brought up this topic to me of us discussing it, I didn't do near the amount of research that you did, of course, but I did find a quote, and I wonder if this quote, I honestly, I wrote it down, but I didn't write down who actually said the quote, but there's an old quote that says, "Dwarves are a people characterized by their short stature and love of mining and beer."
Yeah.
So I wonder if they try to turn to that life of crime, because, I mean, you got to have money for booze. You got to have money to go buy you a pickaxe, so you can go and do your mining. And then once your mining is done, you turn around and you have your beer, you go to sleep, and I guess repeat the next day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually going to be helping a friend next week digging up his garden. And I've looked at the prices of pickaxes at Home Depot, and they are pretty pricey. So, I think, if you're a dwarf, you're probably going to have to rob at least a 7-Eleven to be able to afford the pickaxe and the beer.
But they only keep $20 in the cash register.
Well, they
nowadays.
do. Well, they do. But again, one of the questions I saw on the internet was, do midgets get drunk on less alcohol than a normal person? So is one beer just good enough to get a dwarf drunk?
I mean, that's an excellent theory, because the effect of alcohol on you is usually determined by basically your body mass index, right? How tall you are, how big you are, and then of course there's tolerance and all that stuff built into it as well. But it makes sense that a smaller person could get drunk faster than a bigger person.
Yeah, it must
so
be.
Maybe that's why they didn't like giants. I mean, you think about Andre the Giant.
Oh, good.
I read some deal
he
about
drank like 120 pints of beer or something and still wasn't drunk.
Not only that, but you see the pictures of him just holding a can of beer. Seriously, get on Google and do an image search of Andre the Giant holding a normal 12-ounce can of beer. It's hilarious to see how small that is. And you think about how big that dude was, that's probably, I mean, a 12-ounce beer is probably a sip for him.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. He cracks it open and it's one swallow.
It's gone,
It's got to be.
But that, I also thought, well, it must be pretty nice to drink, like, I don't know, a quarter of a can of White Claw and then just pass out for the night.
True. Yeah, it does make it to where even if they have that interest in mining and beer and they work all day, and then if they go home and, your normal person might buy a 6-pack of beer and drink 2 or 3 of them at night, they buy a 6-pack of beer, that's a week's worth of beer. I mean,
right? Yeah.
They might even buy those aluminum cans that have the resealable lids. I mean, maybe they only drink half a beer a night. So there's some money savings there.
Yeah. I sometimes kind of think, well, actually, that's not true. I only thought about it today. Is what do they do when they like buy something like vitamins? Like 1-a-day vitamins and stuff. Because you get the child size ones, but children's development needs are different because how their bones are forming,
right?
How their systems physiologically are like forming and stuff. So as a dwarf, what do you do? Do you just like get one of those 1-a-day vitamins and cut it into quarters, or what would you think you would do?
Well, it's not just vitamins though. I mean, let's think about even like liquid medicine, right? It says on there, take a tablespoon. So do you take half a tablespoon?
Right.
I mean, do you figure, okay, I weigh, 75 pounds and the normal adult weighs 150, 160 pounds. So am I supposed to take half of this?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a lot of accidental overdoses of over-the-counter medication in dwarves or midgets or little people or any of that, just for that simple fact.
Now you're figuring they're going to be using the same amount of electricity as regular people. Now we know they're definitely using less bath water than regular people, so they're making a saving there, right?
Makes total sense.
Right. Now, in terms of clothes, though...
Well, see, here we go with clothes, though. They're still buying the same amount of clothes.
Well, as a midget, you could buy kids' clothes, but as a dwarf, you've got to go to those specialist shops online.
Wow. As this plane just flew over.
Yeah.
Hopefully that didn't sound too terrible.
Not driven by a midget with a grudge.
Yep. Hopefully not. I mean, we're still here. He didn't drop a bomb on us or anything. Okay. So, whew. Yeah, we dodged one there.
Yeah.
But think about the laundry, though. That's where I was going with the clothes. Yeah. So they probably do laundry less frequently than your average person. Because think how many more loads you could get
you can fit more stuff in the machine.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you have kids, you can do a lot more of the kids' laundry quicker because you can fit so many more of their clothes in there. I wonder if they get a discount at the dry cleaner.
Well... That's true. I mean, they're not going to get through too many Tide Pods compared to the normal person.
Right.
Other than the millennials who... I wonder if there are dwarf millennials eating Tide Pods. I don't know.
I don't know, because some of those Tide Pods might be kind of old. I think you buy those boxes full of them, and if they're not using that much, maybe they expired, something like that.
Maybe the novelty wears off.
Yeah.
But anyway, as I was saying, it's amazing how many dwarves, midgets... get lured into this life of crime. And like I said, I think it's more exploitation, and the predominant type of crime they get involved in is squeezing into small spaces regular people can't, which confused me a little bit because I thought, well, surely it's got to be easier to find a child than a midget, right?
Yeah.
So why not get a child to sneak in there? Plus, if he's a juvenile, he's probably not going to get such a heavy sentence anyway.
That's true.
That's
true.
But if you're planning a heist, right, a jewelry heist, and you're like, dang, we just cannot fit a regular sized man in this gap. We need to find a midget. Now, how long does it take to find a midget who you can then either coerce, threaten, manipulate to crawl into that gap, as opposed to some street urchin kid who could be like, kid, go climb through there and we'll buy you a McDonald's?
Well, see, to me, it'd be obviously so much easier to find the kid, right?
Right.
Because as you're posing this question to me, I'm thinking, forget the crime thing. It's hard to find a midget, period, right?
Right.
So now even if you find a group of regular people out there, all walks of life, men, women, all races, everything, there's hopefully now very few of them that would want to commit a crime with you if you didn't know them, right? You're asking random people, come commit this crime. So now you're taking this very small sect of the population and you don't know any of them, and then you got to find one that's going to be a criminal with you.
Right.
But based off your research, what you're saying is they're actually more apt to do it than, say, a normal-sized person or a regular-sized person. See, I don't even know if saying normal size is even offensive.
Right.
Once again, not trying to be offensive here. Just, talking like we talk.
But do you think that's one thing which is always in the kind of midget or dwarf psyche, that we are predestined to follow a certain career? Because, seasonally... for like Christmas, Halloween, all that type of stuff. You've got
St. Patrick's Day.
You've got to be rubbing your hands together as a midget or a dwarf when those times of year come around. It's like you can't even walk down the street without people chasing you, offering you jobs.
Right. But of course, that's not something like putting Christmas lights up in some city where you could do that.
Well,
put them up and
reach.
Take them down. Yeah. One time a year and make enough money to, live the rest of the year off that one job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the shopping mall Santa Clauses, right? Or whatever in that would be where you'd want to go snag you one of those midgets. But there's no way that they're going to be able to make enough money, even if they work, 12, 14, 16-hour shifts during that little rush of, say, right after Thanksgiving to just up before Christmas. So you're talking about almost a month. There's no way they're going to make enough money in that month to be able to live the rest of that year in doing that job.
You don't think that, like, I don't know, somewhere between like Macy's and Kohl's, the owners are thinking, all right, we need to get 4 midgets to like go in our grotto, to go in Santa's grotto here. And if it gets close to the deadline, that they're not willing to pay more to kind of lure a midget or a dwarf to get in that job, because it's got to be, because they can't be paying a minimum wage because there's not enough of them out there.
Well, so what you're saying is maybe they've unionized and they say, okay,
maybe.
I mean,
maybe.
Is there a midget union out there that says, okay, you know what, if the tall people are going to exploit us and make us dress up like elves from the North Pole, then we're going to have to demand X amount of dollars per hour to do this.
Well, I don't think
that would be smart money.
It would.
Let's be honest with you. And I'm offering that advice free to the little people of America. Hey, maybe y'all need to unionize for some of these.
Well, I agree to a point there. I don't think the midgets would, because midgets, again, according to the internet, seem to be pretty easygoing. It's the dwarves who are the problem causers. Those are the really whiny ones. And again, the little people of America seems to be made up of the dwarves and not the midgets. So, yeah, it's probably the dwarves who have formed this union and said, hey, if you want us to play, an elf, because apparently there's a shortage of elves, real elves, that they're the ones forming the unions and say, hey, yeah, you need to pay us $36 an hour to, go and sit there in Santa's grotto and scare kids.
Right, but by that rationale, then, shouldn't the midgets create their own union and say, hey, don't hire the dwarves, they want $36 an hour, we'll do it for $30 an hour.
Well, yeah, maybe.
And now they're all going to kind of hurt themselves, because now you get these two unions fighting back and forth, and it's going to lower the wages.
Yeah, but you have to think, sometimes, I feel they're a little ungrateful for some of the employment they do get. I mean, you take dwarf tossing, right? I mean, if you had a job where somebody just picked you up and you were dressed in a Velcro suit and threw you against the wall, that's pretty easy money, right?
Made famous in The Wolf of Wall Street,
right? Yeah,
where they're doing that, and then they have their little talk around the conference table about, well, what can we do? And, can we look them in the eye? And you say, no, you can't look them in the eye and all that. And you sit back and you laugh at that, right?
Right.
But the ironic part is that was a service that was offered to them. Of course, this is a movie, right? But this is actually stuff that happens.
Right, yeah.
You can look in some of the little kind of tabloid type weekly newspapers, the free newspapers that come out, and there's always one with midget wrestling.
Right.
It's like, oh, midget wrestling night this night.
Yeah.
And of course, they're using the word midget once again. So there's this understanding, I guess, among that community that there's people other than me that are fascinated by midgets.
Well,
they're fascinated.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. For some reason, once you get a lot of midgets in a group, they don't tend to make the best decisions. It's not like you get a group of, again, we don't want to be offensive by using the word regular, but when regular people get together, I mean, I know nobody's really a fan of kind of group think too much, especially in the workplace, because it's annoying. But when you get large groups of midgets together, they don't necessarily make good decisions. One of the urban legends on the internet, which nobody can really fact check whether it's true or not, was the Cambodian Midget Fighting League.
Cambodian Midget Fighting League.
So you have to remember this is Cambodia. I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, like Cambodia was the poster child of a starving African country.
Sure.
Right, this place was like, it's the one where they showed kids like almost looking like skeletons, and there'd be a vulture there.
Yeah, that you can feed for 40 cents a day.
That type of stuff. So, in Cambodia, despite all those issues, there were enough midgets who formed a fighting league. And if you let's think about it. If you're going to form a fighting league, right, you're thinking you're going to have enough of an audience who can pay enough money to come and watch you fight, which is my first issue, right? So we're starving, but I can guarantee what these people would like more than food, bread, water, is they would like to come and watch midgets fight, all right? So that was my first issue with the entire scenario.
Well, if you have a population that apparently in Cambodia might be fascinated with midgets, right? It's kind of the same thing with homeless people. People say, well, why don't they just go out and get jobs and do that? And you give them money, and what do they typically want to do? They go buy booze, and they go buy cigarettes, and they go buy drugs. So maybe in Cambodia, rather than getting that food and water, they want to spend their money on watching midget fights.
Right. And, well, I mean, again, this urban legend goes that the first fight they had was against a lion.
Oh, they're not fighting each other.
No.
Oh, you left that part out.
No, this isn't like the Hunger Games.
Okay. No. See, this just got more interesting.
or the very Hungry Games.
Yeah, that would be the very Hungry Games.
That would be the definition of the Hunger Games. Yeah, but no. Apparently, their first outing, they fought against a lion. After 12 minutes, 28 of the midgets were dead, and 14 were badly wounded. So my first thought was, hold on a moment. That's 42 midgets. Where did they find 42 midgets? And secondly, again, as this group think, did they not think we'll start out against something maybe slightly less dangerous, like a donkey or
like a house cat
or a cow or just something? Or well, they'd probably eaten all the cows, but yeah, I mean, you got to think like the first rat out, whoever the leader of this group was. We're going to fight a lion. I wonder how many of them really kind of thought, we stand a good chance.
Sure, but let's also stop and think about the fact that, okay, you got this starving country. You've somehow rounded up 42 midgets.
Yeah.
How did you get the lion in there? I mean, whoever put this together had a much bigger brain for showmanship than, say, Vince McMahon in the WWE, right? Because it's like, okay, listen. Got an idea. Let's get 42 midgets, and buddy of mine over here, he's got a lion. We'll put the lion in there. My money's on the lion, so I'm going to tell my buddy I'll reimburse him if somehow the midgets can kill the lion. But if I don't have to reimburse him for that, think of all the profit we're going to make, because now we don't have to pay the 42 midgets that tried to get the lion, because the lion's going to kill them all.
Do you honestly think there's somebody in Cambodia who's that good at networking that he knows 42 midgets plus the man who owns a lion?
Apparently, there's got to be somebody.
This dude can find anything. It's like, yeah, midgets, I'll get you 40 midgets. I'll get you a lion.
Hey, what if it ended up being the old Tiger King guy? Maybe he, look at what he was able to put together.
Right, yeah.
And so anybody that's going to deal in those exotic cats, they've got some bizarre connections.
Yeah, I saw a great meme actually a couple of months ago. I was actually late to watching the Tiger King, but I saw a great meme. And it's that famous one of the woman laying in bed and looking over her shoulder at the man who's struggling to get to sleep. And her thought bubble is going, I bet he's thinking about other women. And he's thinking in his speech bubble, I can't believe all this time I could have bought a tiger for $2,000.
No kidding. That was my one takeaway from the show as well. And of course, as everybody knows, we're broadcasting and recording from the great state of Texas, where it is legal to have tigers. And I've always thought with the Tiger King stuff that came out, and you got good old Joe Rogan who had his deal about people and tigers in Texas, right? And then on top of that, you've got the COVID stimulus money that came out.
Yeah.
I mean, any married couple that qualified for that got enough money to go buy a tiger. I'm surprised there weren't more tiger purchases in Texas.
I actually think...
that just seemed like the perfect storm to come together of lots of tiger purchases.
I actually think that's why they capped the stimulus package at a certain amount, so one person could not buy a tiger. It had to be an equal male and female arrangement in a relationship for you to actually pool your money together and buy a tiger, because there wasn't enough money in that stimulus check to actually buy a tiger. If you actually wanted to buy a tiger and be able to afford the enclosure, it actually relied on both of you being complicit.
Can you imagine, though, let's say you're a single mom with 2 kids. You got $500 for each one of those kids. So you get your $1,200, and then you get $1,000 because you got the 2 kids. Yeah. And rather than actually feed them, you could go buy a tiger.
Well, yeah, but also, I mean, you know, you build a really bad enclosure, you also don't have to worry about feeding the 2 kids past a couple of weeks after you've got the tiger anyway.
There you go.
But anyway, back to the crime thing. Like I said, you know, it's hard for small people to find consistent employment past the seasonal stuff, and so a lot of them get lured, coerced, manipulated, threatened into lives of crime. And there were a couple of cases which came up repeatedly when I was researching this, and one of these I actually have to read this word for word because I can't do it justice.
Go for it.
It says, the short, troubled life. Now, first of all, the short, troubled life. I thought, oh.
Well,
short, troubled life.
Right. It is
He's thrown one in there.
Right. It's almost like this innuendo, like a zinger. Did they put quotes around short, or was that just the way the dude wrote the sentence?
I actually did when I wrote it down, but the moment I read it, I was like, oh, come on. This isn't like a...
talk about a low blow,
This isn't a tribute.
Right?
This isn't a tribute to him. So the short, troubled life of a drug-dealing Harlem midget came to a violent end when he was gunned down while guzzling beer and shooting dice outside of a housing project. Agard, which, you know, they've already given him the name of some kind of like Norse god. Agard. A-G-A-R-D.
Wow, that's the dude's name.
Yeah. Okay. 3 feet tall. Had a long police record. Apparently, one of the times he was arrested, he actually said, I'm a midget. I don't want to be called a dwarf.
Ooh.
And I found that kind of controversial, again, from what we've said before about dwarves, you know, kind of like being offended by the midget word.
Right.
He was actually a dwarf, disproportionate arms and limbs. Said, I'm a midget. I don't want to be called a dwarf.
So what you're essentially describing there is, can a... and I'm going to use the term little person here because I got to talk in the very generality. So can a little person then choose their identity just like we have with the gender identities of choosing which gender you want to be? So can a dwarf identify as a midget?
Well, I mean, he probably can, but I mean, if you look at him, I mean, you're going to... I mean, given we know the difference between the two, we're going to look at him and say it's a dwarf.
Yep. Or it's a midget. But now can they say, no, I don't identify as a dwarf. I identify as a midget.
Would you think that kind of agony of existence kind of contributed to him guzzling beer and shooting dice because he was disappointed he wasn't a midget? He was actually a dwarf?
There could be that, but he was guzzling beer and he was shooting dice. No mention of a pickaxe.
Well, no, he wasn't mining, apparently.
So maybe
he's saving up for the pickaxe. I don't know.
Yeah, but, maybe he was playing dice to try to win enough money to buy the pickaxe.
Well, you have to think who gunned him down. I mean, what threat was he to the local gang community that somebody decided to do a drive-by while he was drinking beer, shooting dice, that somebody's like, we're going to shoot that dwarf.
Well, let's be honest. If you were a member of that gang, you'd say, man, that's our sniper now. I mean, think about the smaller target that dude hit.
Yeah.
That's got to be our sniper. If that dude was able to gun down a dwarf or a midget, throwing dice and guzzling beer, then we've got our sniper.
Right, but also if
you're... somebody call the Navy SEALs and hire this dude.
Right? But also, I mean, like, if you're a gang member, does that count as one full kill? Or just like half a kill or a quarter of a kill? Or...
Yeah, see,
do you need like 4 midgets or 4 dwarves to count for one full kill?
I don't know what the ratio would be, and do you get a full teardrop tattoo, or do you only get half a teardrop?
I think you just get a dot for a dwarf.
Oh,
yeah, that's terrible.
That's got to be unfortunate, especially in that little world.
And The second most popular story,
Okay.
I use the word popular there loosely, about dwarves, midgets, and crime was wrestling midgets killed by fake hookers. Fake hookers, not real hookers. Fake hookers.
Ooh,
Fake hookers,
okay.
right? So it says the world of Mexican midget wrestling is in mourning. So there is a world of Mexican midget wrestling.
Don't judge me by my fascination.
Yeah. So it says after two of its most famous stars were apparently poisoned by fake prostitutes.
Fake prostitutes.
Yeah. So they the dwarves were on a promise. You know, something was going to happen, and they got poisoned. But it didn't actually go into why these fake hookers, and I don't know why they're just calling them fake because they didn't follow through on the promise, but there was no motive apparently.
That's crazy. So you got fake hookers, no motive, to poison midgets.
Yeah, you've got to think about
that. Sounds like a Hallmark
rivals.
Movie special.
Yeah, no, that's an inside job. I bet you some of those other midgets, their rivals, whatever, were like hiring some.
Oh, it had to be. I wonder if it was some kind of a different Mexican midget wrestling club that didn't like those guys, and so they set the whole thing up because apparently there's too many Mexican midget wrestlers, and they had to thin the herd.
Right. Yeah.
Crazy.
But they're actually less likely to get sentenced to the same sentences as regular-sized people when they appear in court for the same crimes.
So there's correlation with this. So
I mean, it's almost like they get treated like juveniles. They don't get the same sentences as regular-sized people. And there was actually a YouTube video which I didn't have time to click on, but anybody listening can actually go ahead and type this in YouTube. And the video was entitled "What Happens When Midgets Go to Prison."
What happens when midgets go to prison?
Yeah.
Okay, so all we got to do is run into YouTube, search that.
Just type that in. At some point, I will actually look that up. But yeah, they actually receive disproportionate sentences compared to regular people, because I guess the judges or whoever kind of like take into account what life will be like for a dwarf in prison.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. What about what we're going to call regular? I'm going to try to use the least offensive term here. Regular-sized people.
Yeah. Because
they're a little bit on the short side as compared to everybody else that's around them being called a midget. For instance, so in one of these things that I looked up, in 2014, the coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, Marvin Lewis, had to apologize for calling the Browns quarterback Johnny Manziel a midget.
Yeah. Well, I think that was more about the LPA, Little People of America. They'd actually done quite a thorough job of trying to eliminate the word midget, but didn't care about the word dwarf so much. And so the word dwarf now is like thrown around for little people, even though they want us to just say little people. But to me, I mean, you know, obviously I'm not a dwarf or a midget, but would you not find it more offensive being called a little person? Because does that name in itself just not suggest that you're less than, rather than just being called a short person?
I gotta agree with you on that one. The one struggle that I've always had with the little people term, it just doesn't flow. I almost wish you could come up with a new word, new name, or whatever to describe it, because little people just doesn't sound creative enough. I mean, you have names for races, you have names for, let's take Texas, for instance.
Right.
You're a Texan if you live in Texas. I mean, we went at least as far as to do that, and it wasn't too much of a challenge to get from Texas to Texan, right? But at least when you say Texan, you get it. It rolls off the tongue. It's descriptive. You know what it's saying. Little people, it doesn't roll off the tongue, and it seems to be very undescriptive of what's really going on. And then even if you look at, and I can't think of the TV channels, but the TV channels that mostly women watch that have all the reality shows, they have reality shows that have nothing but little people in them, and it's little people in Miami or little people LA or whatever. It just doesn't roll off the tongue.
Right.
It's they got to come up with something better.
Well, yeah.
I mean, you gotta lock some of them in a room and say y'all can't come out of this room until you come up with a better term.
Right. Yeah. And the actual word for fear of short or little people in itself doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. This is the word. It's achondroplasiaphobia. Now, who's going to remember that?
Wow.
Who's going to remember that word?
You could say
it's
that.
It's like, I have a fear. I can't tell you what it is.
Yeah.
It's achondroplasiaphobia. Fear of short or little people.
So there are people out there that have this phobia.
Yeah.
That they're just basically afraid of midgets, right? So I guess they would be the 100% exact opposite of me.
Right.
Where I'm so fascinated.
Unnatural fascination as opposed to the fear
This would be the yin to my yang then.
Yeah.
So take me and one of these achondroplasmophobia people and put us in a room with midgets. What a science experiment that would be.
Right. But you're already, like, these people who have this fear, like, if the word dwarf or midget is offensive, you're not even giving these people the chance to explain their fear without being offensive.
Right.
Because how many people who have a fear of dwarves or midgets are going to really be like, yeah, I have achondroplasiaphobia. Just say, no, I just don't like dwarves.
Yeah. And I wonder how many people are out there that have this and don't even realize that they do have it.
Oh, my ex-wife used to hate midgets and dwarves. If they appeared on TV, she had to turn away. She had to turn her head away. Yeah, I mean, there are people out there who
so
just like clowns. Like people have an irrational fear of clowns.
Right.
People have this irrational fear of like midgets and dwarves. That they actually have it.
I guess there are some sad people in all walks of life. I mean, if you're afraid of midgets, you're missing out. Can you imagine going to a psychiatrist, right? And it's your first visit, and so you lay down on the couch, and the little psychiatrist, they whip out the legal pad, and they're about to take the notes, and like, okay, so what brings you here today? And you say, I'm scared of midgets.
You got to be scraping the bottom of the barrel, though, if that's the reason you're going to the psychiatrist.
Well,
surely.
I think people go to psychiatrists for all kinds of goofy reasons.
You've got to have a lot of money left over on your medical plan to actually use your last remaining few visits to go and complain that you're scared of dwarves.
Well, if you've got an HSA and you got money you got to burn, I mean, why not go to a psychiatrist and say, I'm afraid of midgets?
Right, yeah.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
But maybe I should go to one and say, I'm fascinated with midgets.
Well, yeah.
Maybe you should have looked that term up on the internet and figured out what's wrong with me here.
Well, yeah, but I don't think, really, generally, they're doing themselves any favors in terms of, like, the LPA trying to ban the whole midget tossing thing, right, or the dwarf tossing thing, because, it's a victimless event. Because, if I'm a dwarf and I'm being paid like $25 an hour to dress up in this Velcro suit,
right?
They're going to give me all the beer I can drink, which is probably half a can of Miller Lite per night.
Yeah.
And, just throwing me against the wall. I'm sticking there. Everybody's cheering. I'm getting, 3 or 4 hours. Like I said, I can have almost a whole can of beer all night if I want it. So I'm completely blind drunk. I don't understand what the complaints are about it. I mean...
And in this example that you're bringing, it's not like... they're being forced to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're voluntarily going and doing this. So why ban that? I mean, that's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, I mean, it started in Australia, which isn't surprising.
The whole midget tossing thing
midget
started
tossing
there?
thing, early 80s, started in Australia. Because, in Australia, for the most part, you've got to worry about being murdered by every insect and reptile there. So, they obviously needed to come up with something else which was entertaining. But actually in America, Florida, of all places, banned it in 1989. I mean, if it gets banned in Florida, it's got to be pretty bad. I mean, you're talking about Florida, where one of their biggest troubles at the moment is that the amount of meth, which is actually flushed into the sewage system,
right?
It's creating meth gators. And so you have alligators who are even more pissed off than normal, who are
because they're
approaching
on meth.
because they're on meth basically, and they get addicted to meth and having non-stop meth. And so they're attacking people, and they've had to close down and rebuild certain golf courses to actually put up these fences to stop gators actually chasing the golfers. So we're talking about Florida here, right? So Florida banned the whole dwarf tossing thing almost 30 years ago, and New York followed about a year later, which, New York's New York. I wouldn't think, like on your average tourist night in Manhattan, that, top of your list are like, we'll go look at Broadway, then we'll go see some midget tossing. I wouldn't think that'd be a big deal. But Florida, that one really did surprise me.
No, that does surprise me as well, and I guess that's one of the great things about living in Texas, because I can't imagine us ever banning that. But at the same time, why would you want? What would be the purpose of banning it? I'm not following that logic.
Yeah.
No one's getting hurt. The guys are doing it voluntarily. And
I'll bet you a few of them got hurt.
Well, okay, let's be honest. There was probably some injuries, right?
There's some head first ones.
But you're also, if you think about it, that was kind of along the lines of the popularity of those Velcro suits where you'd run and you'd jump on the trampoline, and you'd kind of do it yourself, right? You'd stick yourself to a wall.
Yeah.
So,
and you had to pay for it.
Yeah, and you had to pay for it. So you're choosing to do that, and now they ban something like that. I don't know. I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, and I am, I was trying to be sensitive, and I was trying to look at it from, midgets, dwarfs' point of view, and so I was looking up,
So what you're saying is you kind of squatted down on the ground, or?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to put myself in the place of a little person and think, what prejudices would you face, and repeatedly those prejudices. If you could talk to regular sized people, what type of advice would you give to them and say, hey, don't treat us like this because it makes us feel inferior?
Sure.
And I actually found about 3 different websites which actually had advice for, again, like regular sized people, not what to do in interaction with
so kind of a guidebook for your normal or regular height person.
Yeah.
Of talking to a midget.
Yeah. Now I could only find 5 points, so I don't know if it's that big of an issue, to be honest. Number 1, and this was number 1 on all 3 all 3 websites, right? Don't bend over to talk to us.
Ooh.
Apparently that's in Solon. Don't bend over to talk to us.
So
we can hear you just fine. We can hear Shaq O'Neal. We can hear you. Don't think you're all that big guy just because you're 4 foot taller than us.
That's interesting,
right?
Because even if I'm 6 foot tall, and if I was talking to somebody that's, say, 5'5",
right,
I'm gonna not necessarily bend over, but I am definitely gonna look down,
right.
And then if I'm talking to him for at least an extended period of time, we're going to have to sit down in a chair so I'm not doing this, or I'm going to find myself just kind of slightly bending over so I've not got all that pressure on my neck.
Yeah.
And I think where they're probably trying to get at here is the whole bending over to talk to a child.
Right.
You try to kind of get
put
to
your
their
hands on
levels,
your knees,
kind of deal. And so they don't want to feel like a child.
Yeah.
So I get that. I totally get that. So rule number 1, don't bend over when you're talking to a midget.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Number 2 actually kind of surprised me because I thought this would be towards the end of the list, but apparently this is a big thing.
Okay.
Don't assume we want to hear your greatest midget joke.
Ooh.
I don't even have a greatest midget joke.
I don't have a...
I don't even have a
So
least great midget joke.
I don't want to jump too far ahead because I don't know what the other rules are, but is there a rule against asking them what the best midget joke they've ever heard is? Because here's both of us sitting. Here's both of us sitting here right now. Neither one of us have a midget joke.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of jokes.
And you out of everybody should have a midget joke. But no, I don't have any.
I can't believe I don't have a midget joke.
I don't have a midget joke. So,
all right. I'd like a submission of a good midget joke.
So
I need to add a midget joke to my arsenal.
So we can actually cross that one off as we are not guilty of.
Yeah.
One, number 2.
Yeah. Number 1, I got to be honest with you. I'm pretty sure I'm guilty of that one.
Yeah.
Number 2, I know I'm clean on that. Right. So I'm 50-50 right now.
Now, number 3, don't pat us on the head.
Oh, yeah. I could see that.
There's got to be some temptation.
Oh, yeah.
Coming in
that would be... Well, it depends on if they're wearing a hat. Because... For some reason, I think...
Like a leprechaun,
well,
you mean?
Yeah, but I thought they all wore hats because I thought they were just issued to them or something. So I wouldn't ever want to, touch somebody else's hat.
Right,
but I could see the women not wearing hats. But so I can honestly tell you I have not broken that rule. But now that I know it's a rule, it's going to be very hard for me not to break that rule.
It's actually made it worse, isn't it?
Oh, it's made it much worse. Because now if I see one, I'm just going to want to pat it on the head. I don't know if I want to adhere to Rule 4 and 5 because at least I'm still 1 out of 3. But man, rule number 3 sounds real inviting.
It's going to be difficult to adhere to.
Oh man, one, that's a tough one.
Well, number 4 is actually even worse.
It's
don't take a selfie with us.
Oh,
there's no way that's not going to happen.
Well, first of all,
with or without their permission, there's no way that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that is definitely going to happen. Yeah. So it hasn't happened yet. But I can guarantee you, I'm breaking rule number 4.
That's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, even if I have to pretend to tie up my shoes and then hold the phone and kind of move it around so they're in the background.
I'm gonna figure out a way for that to happen.
No way we're not breaking that rule.
No, we're not. Sorry, that one's getting broken.
So 1, 3, and 4 we're not compliant with at the moment. Number 5, though, this one actually surprised me, and this was
hang on, but before you go to number 5, let's go back to number 2 with the whole midget joke thing. Because do you realize when we do get a midget joke, we're then gonna say, "Hey, I've got this joke," and we're gonna tell it, and then we're gonna break that rule. Once we actually have a midget joke in the arsenal of jokes, we're gonna break that rule. But so just because we haven't broken the rules yet, and now we know what the rules are, and when we run across a midget, we realize, honestly, I'm 4 out of 4 that these rules are getting broken, right? Well, I haven't even heard 5 yet, and I'm guessing I'm probably going to end up breaking number 5 too.
But do you think that rule is going to be one of the last ones? Because you can guarantee we're going to be bending over to talk to them, patting them on the head, and taking a selfie before we start telling the joke. Because I don't think you're going to break the ice with the joke.
No, I absolutely get what you're saying there. We're not necessarily doing them in that order,
right,
but we're still breaking the rules as you have them listed out on this list. Definitely, 1, 3, and 4 are going to happen before 2.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm picturing myself as I pat somebody on the head and am taking the picture, bending over, talking to them. Once I hit click on my phone to take the picture, the very next words out of my mouth are whatever this new midget joke that I have is, and then asking them if they have a better one. So
it might be worth now actually arming yourself and actually looking up a joke on the internet because you don't have one.
I know, and that's crazy. I do need to get a midget joke. I will get one, but so I'm picturing myself 45 seconds to a minute in having a conversation with a midget.
After you've patted them on the head.
Well, no. During this 45 seconds, I've already broken four of these 5 rules. So what is rule number 5?
Don't shout things at us. Which I'm assuming, and this was again on like 2 of the 3 lists. It's when they're walking down the street, apparently they'll get just random comments like midget, dwarf.
Oh, I got you.
They don't like that, apparently.
So basically, rule number 5 would be broken first, because I'm going to say, hey, midget, then I'm going to run over there, bend over, talk to him, pat him on the head, take a selfie, and tell a joke.
That would be broken first.
Yeah.
So basically...
I'm doomed with these rules.
So basically, out of these 5, other than the fact you don't actually have a greatest midget joke, the other 4 are guaranteed to be broken.
Well, here's the problem, though. Once we finish today's podcast, within about 15 minutes, I'll have a midget joke looked up. So, yeah, this is not looking good for me. I mean, it's really not looking good for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure, just like in the last podcast, we provided far more information on the topic than any reasonable person needs to know about something.
And of course, as you can always rely on us, we have fact-checked everything, at least with a halfway decent Google search, maybe. That's the way we roll. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah. I just want to leave you with this, and this is why it's hard to take this subject maybe as seriously as we should take it.
Right.
That one of the headlines which came up twice on discriminatory issues was midget sues grocer, cites belittling remarks.
Oh, terrible. He didn't even see how he was. He didn't even see how he was setting himself up.
He had to go there.
Oh, I want to say, poor little guy, but that would make me sound terrible, right?
Say that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks everybody for tuning in to this episode of The Wolf and the Shepherd. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to hitting you up with very interesting, intriguing, and informing topics with all of our fact checking and research behind it. Thanks, everyone.